Welcome to Self-Made Buzz. Operation Epic Fury began on February 28, 2026, a joint US-Israeli strike on Iran. 3 weeks later, Iran had executed what analysts are calling the worst-case scenario for global energy security, not just blocking the Strait of Hormuz, but systematically striking every major energy facility across 6 Gulf states. Iran didn't just target shipping lanes, it hit the refineries, gas fields, LNG terminals, pipelines, and storage tanks, the entire energy export architecture that these countries had built specifically as backup routes when the strait closed. Every escape route, every bypass, every alternative. Alright, before we get into the details, let me quickly walk you through what this video covers. First, we'll examine Iran's strategic geography, why the Strait of Hormuz matters, and how the Gulf states tried to bypass it. Then we'll go through Iran's systematic campaign, country by country, facility by facility, every major strike since February 28. Next, we'll look at the devastating numbers, how much global energy capacity was affected, and what this means for world markets. We'll analyze why the Gulf states found themselves trapped despite trying to stay neutral. And finally, the most sobering reality, this represents a fundamental shift in how energy warfare is conducted in the 21st century. Now let's understand each of these properly, starting from the beginning, the geography that makes this crisis so dangerous. Let's look at the map. Iran sits at the heart of West Asia, bordered by Iraq to the west and Afghanistan to the east. Notice this narrow waterway at the bottom, the Strait of Hormuz. Through this tiny gap, 20% of the world's oil passes every single day. Think about that. 1/5 of global oil supply flowing through a waterway just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. To the south, the Gulf Arab states, Bahrain hosts the US Navy's 5th Fleet. Qatar houses massive LNG terminals, and Oman has traditionally served as Iran's back channel to the west. For decades, the Gulf states understood this vulnerability, so they built alternatives. The UAE constructed the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, running 236 miles from their main oil fields to Fujairah port outside the strait. Saudi Arabia built massive refineries on the Red Sea coast at Yanbu. Qatar developed the world's largest LNG export terminals at Ras Laffan. But here's where things get complicated. When Operation Epic Fury began, most analysts expected Iran to respond the way it always had, with calibrated, symbolic strikes designed to signal resolve without triggering full escalation. That calculation turned out to be dangerously wrong. Iran executed something the Gulf had never seen before. A systematic, premeditated campaign targeting the energy infrastructure of every major Arab state in the region. And the numbers are staggering. Let's go through this country by country, facility by facility. Starting with Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter. Saudi Aramco controls approximately 12% of global oil production, with capacity exceeding 12 million barrels per day. It was always going to be a primary target. On March 3rd, one of the world's largest oil refining complexes, the Ras Tanura refinery, was forced to halt operations after Iranian drone debris caused a fire. Ras Tanura isn't just a refinery. It's a symbol of Saudi Arabia's entire oil export infrastructure, located on the eastern coast directly facing the Persian Gulf. But Iran wasn't finished with Saudi Arabia. Iranian drones targeted the Shaybah oil field, a remote but enormously productive facility deep in the Rub al-Khali desert, producing over 1 million barrels per day. Then came the strike on the SAMREF refinery in Yanbu on the Red Sea coast. The timing of the Yanbu strike was particularly significant. Saudi Arabia had begun pumping large volumes of oil west toward the Red Sea to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. By striking Yanbu, the western terminus of the kingdom's oil bypass infrastructure, Iran demonstrated it understood exactly what Saudi Arabia was doing and intended to close that escape route too. Moving to the UAE, The United Arab Emirates had positioned itself as neutral, loudly insisting it was not a party to US-Israeli campaign. Tehran's response was to strike it anyway, and with particular focus on the infrastructure the UAE had built precisely to survive a Hormuz closure. The first major UAE strike hit Jebel Ali, the largest port in the Middle East and one of the busiest in the world. Then Iranian drones targeted oil facilities in Fujairah, strategically located on the Gulf of Oman, outside the Strait of Hormuz, with direct access to the Indian Ocean. The Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline runs 236 miles from the Habshan oil fields to Fujairah. Its capacity is 1.5 million barrels per day, roughly 60% of the UAE's normal export volume. Iran struck both ends of this critical bypass route. Iran then struck the Shah gas field, operated by Abu Dhabi National Oil Company in partnership with Occidental Petroleum. Before the strike, the Shah gas field supplied 20% of the UAE's total gas supply and 5% of the world's granulated sulfur. Qatar. And this is where it gets particularly devastating. Qatar produces approximately 20% of global LNG supply. Its Ras Laffan industrial complex is arguably the single most important gas export hub on the planet, and Iran hit it 3 times. After the first strike, QatarEnergy declared force majeure, halting LNG deliveries to buyers worldwide. Then came the second wave of Iranian missiles, causing extensive damage. Then a third attack on March 19th. 3 separate waves of strikes on the same complex, each compounding the damage from the last. There's a cruel irony here. The South Pars gas field straddles the maritime boundary between Iran and Qatar, meaning Iran was retaliating against Qatar for strikes on a gas field that Qatar itself partly depends on. Qatar's foreign minister condemned the Israeli attack on South Pars as dangerous and irresponsible, noting it was an extension of Qatar's own North Field. Iran struck Ras Laffan anyway. Kuwait faced a siege of its primary energy vulnerability, the Mina Al Ahmadi refinery, one of the largest in the Middle East. Fires broke out across multiple units at the facility, which processes about 730,000 barrels of oil per day. Drones struck the refinery for 2 consecutive days. Bahrain's strategic significance derives primarily from hosting the US Navy's 5th Fleet, the primary American naval force responsible for the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Arabian Sea. Iran targeted the 5th Fleet headquarters directly with missiles. Even Oman, historically maintaining the most constructive relationship with Iran, saw its bypass ports at Duqm and Salalah struck by drones. And let's look at the evidence that shows Iran's systematic planning. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan's assessment was damning. The level of accuracy in some of this targeting indicates that this is something that was premeditated, pre-planned, pre-organized, and well thought out. And the numbers confirm this systematic approach. Let's put the scale of this campaign in perspective with hard data. The UAE alone says it has been targeted with more than 2,000 Iranian drones and missiles since the war began in late February. When we look at Qatar's LNG capacity, the numbers become even more alarming. Qatar's Ras Laffan complex alone accounts for 20% of global LNG supply, with production halted and QatarEnergy declaring force majeure. 1/5 of the world's liquefied natural gas exports are offline. Looking at Saudi Arabia's refining capacity tells the same story. The Ras Tanura complex processes over 600,000 barrels per day at the SAMREF facility in Yanbu at 400,000 barrels daily. Plus the Shaybah field's million barrels per day, we're looking at over 2 million barrels of daily Saudi capacity under attack. The UAE's bypass infrastructure tells perhaps the most revealing story. The Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline has a capacity of 1.5 million barrels per day, representing roughly 60% of the UAE's normal export volume. With both ends of this pipeline under attack, the UAE has lost its primary Hormuz alternative. So what does all this mean? The consequences of these coordinated strikes extend far beyond the immediate damage. Iran has executed what energy analysts describe as the nightmare scenario, simultaneous disruption of both primary export routes and their carefully constructed alternatives. The downstream consequence is not merely an oil crisis. Roughly 30% of Europe's diesel imports and half its jet fuel imports came from the Middle East by 2026. With refinery capacity offline, analysts describe the result as a distillate crisis centered on Europe, not merely a Hormuz disruption. Throughout all of this, the Gulf Arab states have maintained an increasingly strained posture of official non-involvement. Despite extensive diplomatic efforts to remain neutral, they find themselves right at the center of Iran's firing line. Active steps to remain neutral, like limiting US access to bases in the region, have done little to shield them from Iranian attacks. The world's energy system was built on the assumption that even during crises, most critical infrastructure would remain operational. Iran has stress-tested that assumption in the most consequential way possible. And the facilities struck are not quickly rebuilt. Ras Laffan, Mina al-Ahmadi, SAMREF, Shah gas field. These are multi-billion-dollar complexes that take years to construct. Given this reality, what can be done? Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned that the strikes on Gulf infrastructure represented a fraction of Iran's capabilities, threatening zero restraint should Iran's own energy facilities come under further attack. The escalation ladder remains dangerously unstable. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan has been most direct in his warnings. They reserve the right to take military actions if deemed necessary. He later warned that Gulf states' tolerance of Iran's attacks was limited, calling on Tehran to immediately recalculate its strategy. The patience being exhibited is not unlimited. Several pathways emerge from this crisis. Immediate diplomatic efforts focus on preventing further escalation while establishing mechanisms to protect civilian energy infrastructure. Longer-term strategies must address the fundamental vulnerability of choke point-dependent energy systems and the need for truly diversified supply routes. Before we close, let's quickly revise the key terms you should remember for the exam. Strait of Hormuz, the critical choke point through which 20% of global oil flows. Force majeure, Qatar's declaration halting LNG deliveries worldwide. Systematic targeting, Iran's premeditated campaign against bypass infrastructure. Energy choke points, geographic vulnerabilities that control global supply flows. Alright, with those key terms in mind, let's step back to see the bigger picture. The 2026 Gulf Energy Infrastructure Campaign represents a fundamental shift in how energy warfare is conducted. Previous conflicts targeted individual facilities or shipping lanes. What Iran executed was something categorically different, a simultaneous, coordinated campaign against the entire energy export architecture. The sand has shifted beneath the world's energy architecture. The facilities struck Ras Laffan, Mina al-Ahmadi, SAMREF, Shah gas field are multi-billion-dollar complexes that take years to construct. Even after a ceasefire, the damage to global energy supply chains will take months or years to repair fully. The rebuilding, physical, geopolitical, and strategic has not yet begun. If this analysis helped you understand the complexities of modern energy warfare and its implications for global security, please subscribe for more in-depth coverage of international relations and geopolitics. Your support helps us continue bringing you this level of detailed analysis.